Good morning and welcome. My name is Sandy McDonald, and I'm the Director of the Office of Economic and Small Business Development. And Happy New Year to you all, if I have not said Happy New Year to you as of yet. And we're here, folks. If you're watching me today, if you're listening to me today, if you're participating today, you're in 2021. And in 2021, Broward County's Office of Economic and Small Business Development, we're going to continue the things that we've been doing since I've been here, 2013, 14, 15. We used to do workshops, meet and greets, tons of them. And we used to do them face-to-face, physically and visually, within rooms, bodies connecting, folks speaking, touching, handshaking, smiling. But we're going to do 2021 in the beginning, the same way we did 2020. We'll be doing them virtual. But we still want it to be just as passionate, just as intense, just as informative, and just as substantive for you. So I am going to start 2021 off by saying to you, thanks for joining us. And as you follow our events calendar, tons of events we'll continue to do this year as last year, as in the previous years. But as we always say, as a small business, you're busy. So we want you to make sure you are engaging the workshops and the webinars that we're providing that are of assistance to you. No need of me seeing you at every single one unless you need every single one. But we want our viewers to be able to get access to information that can help them grow their business. This set of Rise Business Forums, and this is the second one. We did one last year, this is the second one. Probably going to do 2 more, 3 more max, and then continue our regular workshops. This is to bring information specific to our small businesses, relevant to things that we've heard from our small businesses that they need, that you need. So hopefully if you're on this webinar today, or if you're listening to this virtual workshop today, you understand that we're talking about taking it back to the basics. Next slide. We're talking about, or asking, are you disconnected? We want to make sure you understand what it really takes as a business, small business, entrepreneur looking to start a business. What does it take to really do business with government? Do you really understand that if you're in the state of Florida or any state, if you are a legitimate business, you have to be registered with that state? Do you understand if you wanted to participate in procurement with government, you got to be registered with that government, including Broward County? Do you understand that there are sometimes programs to offer you opportunities or advantage you because you as your small business might fit a specific criteria? Like Broward has a small business program, being a registered vendor with Broward County, being registered in the state, and getting certified are 3 different things. But if all are done, it could advantage you as a small business. Understanding what the federal government, the state government, local government, and even our cities require of business, those are some of the things you're going to hear about today. This is a back to basics. Again, we do a lot of workshops, a lot industry specific, a lot relevant to things that can help grow your specific business or industry, a lot relevant to networking. This one is more back to the basics to make sure that if you're disconnected, you really understand what it takes to get connected when it comes to being a business in the state of Florida, specifically Broward County. Next slide. So today, you're going to hear from a series of speakers with different discussion topics about the business startup, the ideal of understanding we all just came through COVID-19 and some of the interruption, common mistakes and challenges of businesses, recognizing that when you first get going, and unfortunately, some of our small businesses who were looking to get some of our CARES grants stumbled. Some, unfortunately, got either confused or was not sure if they were for-profit or nonprofit, or if while being a for-profit business, I could decide because I made no money the previous year, I'm now nonprofit. We want to make sure, not in an embarrassing fashion, this is not about embarrassment, but businesses, in order to sustain themselves, survive and thrive, have to make sure that they are aware of the basics. And again, we recognize some of the audience this morning are those who are entrepreneurs and looking to start up. So these things, they just need to know on the front end. And again, we want to make sure from the state to county government or the city, you do recognize, based on your business, based on your industry, if there's a need for a license, and if so, what that means, if not, what that means. So again, we're going to come to you with different speakers who want to help you understand some of the business basics, getting back to the basics of some of the things that you need to know and remember if you are already a startup. And for some of this business basic is going to help some of our entrepreneurs and those looking to start businesses begin to plot their path to being a successful business. But again, in the beginning, I also want to remind you, stay in touch with us through our newsletter, which comes out every Wednesday, or through our broward.org/econdev, our website, where you can see all of our events and take advantage of those opportunities to get information that's helpful to you, that will help in this situation, sustain your business, as well as grow your business. So with the next slide, I think we're about ready to introduce you to our first speaker, and that's our Economic Development Manager, Mr. Stephen Tinsley. And Steve will come to you with the first section of today's workshop. Steve.
Good morning. Thanks, Andy. Good morning, and welcome to this, our second in the series of RISE workshops. Thank you for being with us this morning. Also, let me congratulate you for making it to 2021. I know it was a little touch and go there in 2020, but we're here, and it's onward and upward from here. So we're glad to have you. Glad that you're here, and we're happy to be with you as well. So we're going to talk a little bit this morning about some of the basics, as Sandy mentioned, and sort of plot the proper course forward. And of course, that starts with a solid foundation. So some of the things we'll talk about today are all about establishing the right foundation to allow your business to grow. And so let's start with some of the basics. Next slide, please. Our office is here for you. Let me start by saying that as you embark on this entrepreneurial journey, we're here to be your partner. We're here to help you identify pitfalls, identify resources, cultivate the right relationships to grow your business. And we do that in a number of areas. We manage, of course, the Kauffman Fast Track Entrepreneurship Program. And in it, we give you step-by-step guidance on how to develop a business plan. We're here to help you with those kinds of things. In our program, we've worked with over 500 entrepreneurs, and we will be starting in the spring of this year our latest online version of new venture business plan development coursework. And so we'll be looking for that information as we roll that out. So I mentioned foundation a minute ago, and what I'm getting at is, how do you make sure that your business is anchored and moored in the right kinds of concepts, that is pointing in the right direction, and that you've contemplated the kinds of challenges that all entrepreneurs face? And one way to do that is to be intentional about everything you do within your business. And when we say that, it sounds, sort of, commonsensical, but in reality, a lot of entrepreneurs sort of back into being in business. Your family may have had a business and you just kind of ended up taking that over. Someone started out, asking you to do something that you have the skill set to do. And before you knew it, you had 2 or 3 or 5 people who were asking for that service, and you just kind of morphed into a business. We recommend that you actually make a smooth break and be intentional about launching your business. And there's some very clear delineations between being an intentional entrepreneur and an accidental one. We consider an accidental entrepreneur to be in that area that I just mentioned to you. Hey, there's an empty storefront. I think a retail operation would go well in here. Let me look into the lease and see if this spot is available. And before you know it, you're in business and you really haven't planned or contemplated much about what comes next. So as an intentional entrepreneur, you want to start with really considering the business you're planning to get into and what those external factors are. You want to make sure that you're building a network around you of people that can complement your skills and abilities to make your business more productive, to help you get on a growth pattern, and to help you encounter some of the challenges and questions and forks in the road that all entrepreneurs face. The next thing that you need to be able to answer before you launch a business is, what am I trying to get out of this business? Now, it's not that the that there's a specific goal you should have in mind. The key is you should have a goal. Some entrepreneurs are only interested in a business operation that can give them a certain level of revenue, a certain level of income, and they can live a comfortable life. Others want to build a business that's going to continue to grow and accumulate lots of wealth, maybe even expand into other areas. But knowing what the end game is before you start is a very important element of being an intentional entrepreneur, knowing what you're trying to do. Before that way, at some point you'll know whether you're being successful or not. Because it's possible for a business to be making money, being profitable, but not meeting the goals that the entrepreneur would prefer. So next slide. So you start by sort of doing a self-assessment of where your skills and abilities lie, where the gaps are, and whether or not you have all of the abilities between yourself and your support network to make you successful in this entrepreneurial venture. Just because you don't have every single element that may be listed here on this spreadsheet or on this PowerPoint doesn't mean that entrepreneurship is not for you. But what it does mean is you have to work doubly hard to make sure you're surrounding yourself with the kinds of people, the kinds of skills, the kinds of abilities that will help you be successful. And always remember that as the entrepreneur, as the business owner, everyone is feeding off of you, off of your energy, off of your confidence, and off of your vision. And so you want to make sure as the entrepreneur that you have those key core elements, that you have this drive to be successful and desire to be successful. And everyone's going to feed off you. There will be people you will add to your team that'll have special skills, that'll have special talents. But the question is, how are those skills and talents being directed? And they will be looking to you as the entrepreneur for that direction. So you don't have to know how to do every single thing, although most businesses start that way because you just can't afford to have too many folks within your operation and be able to afford to pay them and compensate them. But what you need to be thinking about is whether or not I really have the drive that I'm going to need to inspire the people around me to help me be successful. Some folks get into business because they want to be their own boss. And then they discover once they get into business, everybody's my boss. And that's exactly right. And so you have to have that resilience and that energy to drive that business idea forward, and to make sure that the people around you that you surround yourself with, number one, have the skills you need, and number two, that you can inspire them and drive and direct them. Next slide, please. So you've decided that, you've done the inventory. I know I've got a good network of support around me. I think I'm ready to do this. Okay, before you launch into the business, we encourage what we call mind mapping, or, and it's a kind of fancy word for brainstorming, but what you want to be thinking about is that initial idea and whether or not that's all there is to it, right? So we talk to a lot of entrepreneurs here in our office, and some of them are interested in doing business with accounting, right? So, hey, I've got some experience in janitorial and building maintenance. I'll just start a business maintenance, facility maintenance company. I'll get certified through Sandy's shop. And the next thing you know, the millions will be rolling in because the county must spend millions of dollars, right, on janitorial services and maintenance. And they've got airports and ports and large county buildings. And that's all true. That's all true. But are you really entering into a business and an industry where you can grow, where there's not a glut of other people who had exactly the same idea that you had? Remember, entrepreneurship is also about identifying a need that is unmet and finding a new way and a profitable way to meet that need. And so we encourage you beyond just what the obvious would be. Hey, you got buildings, somebody's got to clean them. So, maybe I'll start a janitorial firm. I want you to think beyond that and think about all of the little things connected to the business idea that you have that have the opportunity to generate revenue. In our first Rise workshop, I mentioned Amazon Web Services. And I'll use that again and expand on that a little bit. For example, Amazon, everybody knows it. It's the we sell everything store, right? But they really started selling books online, right? So they started out with a very narrow focus, discovered that they had core competencies in being able to identify not only books, but other things that people wanted, being able to identify them, transport them, and meet people's needs, right? And how did they meet those needs? They met those needs by understanding what their users wanted. So now you begin to go beyond I sell books to I understand what people want and I find it, source it, and get it to them as quickly and as inexpensively as I can. And they just continue to grow that idea. And the same is true in this mind mapping exercise that we have here on the slide. You know, when you think of things like home health services. So South Florida has a high percentage of aging population, right? So there are a lot of needs for those kinds of services. But is home health all there is to a large senior population? Well, of course not. There are all these other pieces within servicing an aging community that business owners should be thinking about, that entrepreneurs should be thinking about. There are all these other services beyond just home health care that you should be thinking about if you're thinking that your customer base could be an aging community. But you have to do the hard work of understanding their needs. So this slide just represents sort of thinking through what some of their other needs are. Now, I mentioned Amazon and how they've grown. They're obviously they're over a $300 billion company today, but the reality is what they've done over the years is they put beneath those services the kind of analytical tools, the kind of data mining tools that are necessary to profile their users and to find the things they want and make those things available. And they got so good at that that there's been a spinoff to that company called Amazon Web Services. Amazon Web Services is a $35 billion company in its own right. And what they do is they are great at logistics, understanding users, projecting and predicting what they want, identifying where those goods and services are. So good, as a matter of fact, that Amazon Web Services has become the spine for a lot of other businesses working in the background to do similar work for those companies that they do for Amazon. And it's become a whole separate business. So what they did is they looked at what their core competencies were, and they looked at how these things could be marketable and valuable to other businesses. And then they started marketing to other businesses. And so when you see Amazon, you see Amazon Web Services, they're kind of doing different things now. And Amazon Web Services is growing tremendously. We've even had conversations with them about ways that they might be able to help us extend our reach. So just be thinking, when you're thinking about that business idea, that kernel, start thinking about all the things that might go around that and wrap around that initial service you're thinking of. Next slide, please. So none of that can happen without research and planning. And this slide simply illustrates that no matter what stage you're in, whether you're in startup, early stage, growth, any stage you're in, there is a consistent need to plan, review, revise, and modify your plans constantly. And all of the planning elements, no matter what stage your business is in, should be a constant thing. Sometimes what happens is you start the business, you might even write a business plan, then you get so tied up with kind of running the business that you never go back to see, hey, is this plan even relevant? Am I even where I thought I'd be? Am I following the steps that I laid out when I wrote this business plan 2, 3, 5 years ago? The reality is you should always be tracking everything your business does back to your plan. And as things change, you pivot. As things change, as a pandemic hits, you pivot, right? As your service becomes less about being in person and more about being virtual, you pivot. But you have to make those changes in your plan so that you're not constantly reacting, but rather you're planning for the changes that will come. Next slide, please. And so one of the building blocks, one of the first things I recommend is that you conduct an exhaustive industry profile so that you understand your business better than anybody else. And I say that because any successful business that you look at, and we use some of the standards, whether it's McDonald's or Walmart or any other business, Amazon, or any other business that's had tremendous success. And the one thing they can tell you about is the industry they're in. They know all of the particulars. I guarantee you, whether it's McDonald's or Wendy's or any of the major fast food chains, they know what every other fast food chain is doing. They know everything about the industry, its capacity to grow, its maximum opportunities. They know it all. They're constantly having their ear to the ground in their own industries. And you should too. If you decide that you're going to start a business that does business with a county, say it's a landscaping firm, you should know something about how many landscaping firms there are in Broward County. If you're going to start a janitorial firm, you should know how many janitorial firms are already under contract in Broward County. It's easy to find out. And you can do that. Those are the kinds of things you need to know before you launch your business. Where's your growth potential? Is it a declining market, right? Or is it expanding? And the reason is you've got to be in a position to modify what I said on that last slide, your plans as things change. But you can't be sensitive to how your industry is changing if you don't know what's going on in your industry in the first place. You need to network with other entrepreneurs, understand what they're doing. And for you to not do that and launch your business is sort of like jumping into the Atlantic Ocean and then trying to learn to swim, right? So you want to know how to navigate your industry before you take the plunge. Otherwise, you'll constantly be sort of floundering around and trying not to drown, right? And so what you really want to do is make sure you know more about your industry than anybody else before you launch, because it may impact the way you launch. It may impact the other areas you may go to. And down the road, as you know what's happening in your own industry, it makes you easier to prepare to pivot as things change without being caught off guard. There are businesses that don't exist anymore because they failed to know their industry and read the future well enough. They thought they were doing the things they needed to do, and before you know it, they were obsolete. Remember, and I mentioned Amazon earlier, before Amazon, there was a company, and for the very young, they may not even know this company exists. There was a company called Sears and Roebuck. Sears was the Amazon before Amazon. They sold everything. They sold it by catalog, they mailed it to you, the same minus the computer systems, the same minus the online options, the same kind of business concept. But as retailers changed the way they bought things, Sears didn't change. And so Sears is now on the verge of extinction while Amazon has grown to a $300 billion company. And that's all by understanding your industry and who your competition is and what you need to do to pivot and be competitive. Next slide. So as I mentioned, understanding the needs of your customers, as I mentioned with the Amazon Web Services example, is a very important part of being successful. Because remember, you're not in business just to sell things. You're in business to sell things that people want. You're in business to provide services that people want and need. But you have to understand those services in order to sell them. You have to understand what they want. You have to understand where your competitors are and what their advantages are. And I think as we get later into this webinar, we'll talk some more about that and about understanding your competition and your competitive advantages. But you should have one. Yours shouldn't be, I'm one of 100 nameless, faceless firms that are vendors to the county, and hopefully they'll pick me to do some business. You need to know what makes your business different and what makes your business better than the competition. It's not always price either. It's a combination of factors that you need to know. And again, if you know your market, if you know your industry and you understand your competition, you can begin to identify that narrow advantage you have over all the rest of your competitors. Next slide, please. So again, what you want to do in order to get out of your business, what you need to get out of it, you need to plan and establish goals for your business. And you've all probably familiar with the acronym SMART goals, but it really is true. You have to really set specific benchmarks that you can count. If it's revenue, that's fine. If it's number of customers, that's fine. If it's customer satisfaction percentage, whatever your goals are, make them very specific and measurable, right? And if the goal obviously shouldn't be, well, I'm going to do $1 million in revenue my first year, right? So there's got to be an achievability factor to it. And you also have to make sure, because of your limited resources, and all businesses have limited resources no matter their size, it's only so much they can do, but make sure your goals are relevant to your success, right? So don't waste time measuring stuff that doesn't matter for your overall success, and have specific time horizons when you want to achieve them. So I mean, we've all probably heard of this SMART acronym, but the reality is if you apply it right, then it will help you make quality goals for your business and really get to where you're trying to get to. Next slide, please. So let's talk a little bit about why the plan is important. It's not important just because most businesses have a plan. Writing a business plan is an exercise in answering the question, how do I make money at this? Right? So there are plenty of ideas, but the essence of the business plan should explain not only to you, but to everyone else who's interested, how is it that he makes money or she makes money doing this? And your business plan should map that out. It starts by revising and refining what the idea is, what the concept is. Oh, janitorial firm. Nope. You need to be much more specific about what it is that your janitorial firm does, why it would be marketable to people, and how you're going to create advantages, right? You need to know all of the ins and outs of your business. You don't have to do them all, right? You don't have to be a CPA. You can hire an accountant, but you really need to understand all the elements of what your accountant is telling you and why those things are important, right? And then, thirdly, you want to make sure that as you talk to lenders, investors, potential partners, employees, you want to make sure that your business plan communicates that you are an entrepreneur who knows what they're doing. That it's not just that you're good at a thing and now you're doing it for money. It's that you're good at this thing and you're also good at managing and directing a business operation. They're two entirely different things. And most entrepreneurs have to be good at both. Next slide, please. So we've kind of made those assessments of ourselves. We've kind of understood why, you know, a business plan is important. And then we get to some very specific reasons, right? So there are going to be bumps in the road. Every entrepreneur experiences them, right? So it's almost like driving and you get to, and then all of a sudden there's a road closed, right? If you don't have a map, now what? You have to feel your way around. But at least if you have a map, even though you intended to take this road to your destination, at least if you have a map, you have some ideas of how to get around the obstructions. And the same is true of a business plan. When something happens that affects your revenue, something interrupts your business activity, when you go back to that plan, you will rediscover the strengths of your business. You'll rediscover the opportunities your business has, and it'll allow you the opportunity to navigate around some of the problems and challenges that you will inevitably face, right? It's not enough just to have ads. It's not enough just to buy time on the radio or television or put an ad, internet ads. You have to have a strategy for who you're trying to reach, what the message is, where those people are so that your message can get there. That's all part of the marketing strategy. And then you also, at some point, you know, who starts out in the supermarket and by the time they check out, they have no idea how much what they have in the cart is going to cost. We all do it subconsciously, even when we're in the supermarket, right? We're kind of running a little tally when we buy something of what we expect that to cost. A business plan helps you to do that for your business. How much will I generate in revenue? How much will this cost? What will I need to get going? And then, as I mentioned before, externally, as you try to attract the best talent for your business, as you try to attract capital investment for your business, as you try to attract financing from a lending institution, they're going to want to see what's your plan, what's your map. We give you this money and you run into a closed road. What's going to happen next? Well, my business plan tells you what happens next. So it's important for you to have that. It's important not only to you and how you internally drive your business, but it's important to the external partners you will make as your business grows. Next slide, please. So having a plan is a key element of the business. So we've done it all now, right? So we've done it all. We've assessed ourselves. We've written our plan. We're ready to go. Let's go. Okay, hang on a second. There are a couple of things you have to do, and Sandy mentioned them earlier, in order to be, fully in business. Have you registered with the agencies that you need to register with? Have you achieved all of the various requirements to do business in your area. What we've discovered as we've worked through this CARES Act Small Business Grant Program is that many businesses simply have not. And it's not entirely, I mean, there have been some elements that have contributed to that. But the reality is a lot of business owners are accidental and they're figuring things out as they go. And they don't know who they should be registered with or what the requirements are to really do business here in Broward County. And so let's start at the state level. At the state level, every business entity, with one exception, needs to have the permission of the state of Florida in order to conduct business here. And that permission comes through the registration with the Florida Department of State, their Division of Corporations. We know it more as SunBiz. Now, I said one exception, and one exception is a sole proprietor that is operating under the proprietor's name. So if I'm Steve Tinsley and the name of my business is Steve Tinsley and I am a sole proprietor, there is no registration requirement with SunBiz. But if I am Steve's Towing and Auto Repair, now I've got to register that name, that's Steve's Towing and Auto Repair, as a fictitious name with the Division of Corporations. So there is a little bit of an exception, but that is the first step in getting the permission of the state of Florida to do business in Florida. Next slide, please. And so what about this Department of Corporations? Well, the numbers are here. They are really the key source for business activity in the state of Florida. So they keep track of tax liens. They keep track of your financial, every time a company borrows money, they file a uniform UCC filing, a uniform credit, consumer credit. At any rate, the point is, this is the repository of business activity in the state of Florida. And you need to be a part of that if you are a corporation, an LLC, partnership, or any sole proprietor using a fictitious name. So there are a number of business entities that are available to you as a business owner, and they all need to be registered with the Department of Corporation, Division of Corporations, unless, of course, you are a sole proprietor operating under your own name. So that's your first step. You want to do that, and that is one of the ways that we have used historically, not only to make sure that you're eligible for the programming we have here, but eligible for the grants we offer, et cetera. If you don't start with a registration with the state of Florida, technically you're not in business in the state of Florida. You're not. And you're not permitted to do business. Obviously, a lot of businesses do that. They allow their registration to lapse. That's a dangerous thing because technically you're operating without the permission of the state of Florida, and you need to make sure your registration with SunBiz, Division of Corporations, is always active. Next slide. So I mentioned fictitious name, and I'm going to welcome Sandy back to introduce our next speaker, who does not have a fictitious name. Her name really is Wendy, but she'll talk some more about fictitious name and the other business entities that may be available to you. I'm not sure if Sandy's there. Sandy, if you're there, I will throw it back to you, and you can introduce our next speaker.
Good morning. Good morning, Dr. Tinsley. Great session. Mr. McDonald is, of course, multitasking this morning. So we're going to go ahead and make sure we keep moving forward with our workshop. And at this time, for the next section and segment of the RISE Business Forum 2, I'd like to take this opportunity to introduce Wendy Wilson. As Dr. Tinsley mentioned, she's the supervising attorney with Legal Aid Services of Broward County, and she's going to share some information about legal businesses and how to get them started. Wendy, welcome.
Good morning, everyone. Can I control the PowerPoint, or?
You could just let them know when you want to go to the next slide.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, next slide, please. This is just a disclaimer to let everyone know that we don't have an attorney-client relationship as a result of this presentation, and that this is just general information, and I'm not giving you legal advice about your specific situation. Next slide. These are just some of the topics that we're going to try and quickly cover. Different types of business entities, the types of documents you'll need, how you could lose liability protections, taxation, and DBAs. Next slide. Okay, so there's 4 basic forms of business entity: sole proprietorship, partnership, limited liability company, and a corporation. We like to work with small businesses that have already developed a business plan, that are intentional entrepreneurs, from Dr. Tinsley's speech. And then your business plan will help determine what type of entity you'll select. Next slide. The first and most basic form is a sole proprietor, and that doesn't require any legal action on your part. It's a single individual, and there's no distinction between the individual and the business. Now, if you want to operate your business under anything other than your legal name, you're going to need to file a fictitious name or DBA, and we'll talk about that a little bit further in the presentation. Next slide. Partnership is when you've got 2 or more people co-owning a business and sharing in the profits. One caveat is that you need to create a partnership agreement that spells out the details of your partnership. Otherwise, it's going to be what the law says, which is basically if there's 2 people, it's 50-50, 3 people, 33.33%, that type of thing. Next slide. With both a sole proprietor and a partnership, you're going to have individual liability. So if the business incurs debts that it can't pay from the profits, the individual or the individual partners are going to be liable. With the other structures that we're going to talk about in just a minute, you may not have that same liability. Next slide. Limited liability corporations or companies, I'm sorry, or otherwise known as LLCs and corporations, are legal entities separate from the owners, and they are a way to limit your business liability. But there's a lot more formalities that we'll discuss for each one. Next slide. For an LLC or limited liability company, you have to register with the Florida Division of Corporations, and there's a $125 filing fee. It can be a single member LLC or multiple members. The members are the owners, and you can, and the managers are the ones that run the day-to-day. Someone can be either or both. You can be a member and not a manager. You can be a manager member, or you can just appoint a manager who is not a member. Next slide. Corporations. Just like an LLC, corporations have can limit your liability, but there's a lot more formality if you set up a corporation. For instance, you have to have an annual meeting, you have to take corporate minutes of meetings, and you have to have corporate minutes relating to major decisions. You need a board of directors, and these are all things that you don't need for an LLC. You also have to register with the state of Florida. You have to file something called Articles of Incorporation, and the filing fee is $70. Next slide. But the benefits of having an LLC or a corporation are that the business owner is only liable for the debts and assets held by, or the business entity. I mean, the business owner is not liable for the business debts. Your personal assets would be free from the business liabilities as long as you don't commingle the two. Next slide. For an LLC and a corporation, you need some internal operating agreements to set forth how you're going to run the company. For a corporation, they would be your bylaws, And for an LLC, it would be an operating agreement. So these are very important to make sure, particularly when there's more than one person involved in the business, to make sure that you set forth who contributed how much money, how you're going to share the profits, who makes management decisions, that sort of thing. Next slide. I had mentioned before that if you have an LLC or a corporation, that you can protect yourself from legal liability, but that's so long as you maintain the formalities of the business and you don't commingle the business with your personal assets. It's called piercing the corporate veil whenever a creditor tries to hold a business owner liable for the business debts because they feel like the business was just a sham. Next slide. The best way to avoid this is by keeping the company separate from your personal business and from any other companies that you have. Don't pay your salon bill from your business account. Don't go buying personal groceries. Don't use your business account as your personal slush fund. Only use business only pay business expenses from your business account, and maintain the formalities of bookkeeping and inputting all receipts that come in, even if they're cash. Don't just put it in your pocket, put it in your accounting system. Next slide. Again, the failure to follow corporate formalities, like taking minutes of meetings, having the annual meetings and things like that. That's another way that creditors can point to the business just being a sham. Next slide. With a small business, if you have a corporation or an LLC, you are going to have to file annual reports, and they are due on May 1st annually. And that's the way to update the public as to the status of your business, who the officers, directors, members, managers are. It's required to maintain active and legal status with the state of Florida. It's $400. It's about $100 roughly to file the annual report, but there is a $400 non-negotiable late fee. If you file it on May 2nd, it's $400 to get your business back in good standing. Now that changed a little bit last year with the pandemic. They did, for the first time that I'm aware of, extended the due date. But then once the due date came, I think it was June 30th last year, again, you had the $400 non-negotiable late fee. If you don't file, then your business can be dissolved by the Secretary of State. Next slide. Small businesses have different choices as to how they're going to be taxed. This is something that you would want to discuss with your accountant or your tax professional. But you can be an S corporation. That's typically what small businesses would choose. A C corporation is generally a larger corporation, like a public corporation. You can also choose to be taxed as a sole proprietor. Next slide. Both an LLC and a corporation can choose to be taxed as an S corp, even though an LLC is not technically a corporation. But if you're taxed as an S corp, that means that all the earnings aren't taxed at the corporate level. They come directly to the owner, and you file the corporate earnings or the LLC earnings on your personal income tax return. An LLC has a different option as well, and they can choose to be taxed as a sole proprietor. And generally the small businesses that we deal with, that is the best option for them. But again, that's something that you would want to check with your own personal tax advisor. Next slide. I'm going to discuss a little bit about starting a Florida nonprofit, because I understand that some of you may have a nonprofit or be interested in a nonprofit. Next slide, please. One difference between a nonprofit, or the big difference between a nonprofit and a for-profit, is that a nonprofit is for public purposes, charitable purposes, educational purposes, political, religious, that type of thing. I think Dr. Tinsley mentioned that just because you're not making money, that doesn't make you a nonprofit. You may feel like a nonprofit, but that doesn't make you a nonprofit. Specific requirements that you have to meet to be a nonprofit. And the first thing that you do is you would get an EIN, just like you would for any other business entity. And then you would file articles of incorporation with the Florida Secretary of State. But this would be articles of incorporation for a not-for-profit corporation, which is very specific. One tip for this is that it's best to file the articles of incorporation by mail, because the online form doesn't have the provisions required by the IRS. You need to have a minimum of 3 unrelated directors. So you can't really start a nonprofit with, you, your mother-in-law, and your great Aunt Mary, because you've got family blood ties and you're all considered to be the same person for IRS purposes as a matter of a conflict. So if you still want your mother-in-law and your great Aunt Mary to be on your board, you still need other people as well, other unrelated people. The relationship also can't be a business relationship. So you can't put your business partner or your, someone that works with you in business on your nonprofit board either. Otherwise, you'll be considered related. It's best to have an odd number to prevent stalemates. And just remember that large boards can be really unwieldy. It's really hard to get 15 people into a room at the same time and then expect them to agree and accomplish anything. The best practice is not to compensate directors and officers of a nonprofit. You're being funded by people that are making charitable donations or grantors, and they don't think it's a good practice for the board of directors and the officers to be compensated. I mean, that's different from employees, but these are just the people that run the organization. They're typically expected to volunteer their services. You're also going to need bylaws for a nonprofit. And the cost to file for a nonprofit is $70. And there is also the annual renewal every year and the annual report. But there's no mandatory late fee for a nonprofit corporation. Next slide. There's a difference between a nonprofit corporation and a tax exempt. You can be a nonprofit corporation and still not have tax exempt status. But if you want to be exempt from taxes, that's a separate filing that you have to do with the IRS. Now, there are nonprofits that don't have their tax exempt status, and what they do if they're going to be obtaining donations and they want those donations to be tax deductible to the donors, then what they would need to do is operate with a fiscal sponsor, but that's really beyond the scope of this discussion. But to obtain tax exempt status, you need to file a Form 1023 with the IRS and then that will help the IRS review your business and determine if you meet the qualifications for tax exemption. There's a short form for small organizations that expect that their gross revenues will be less than $50,000 for each of the next 3 years. And that cost is $275, but otherwise all other nonprofits that are expecting or have received in the past more than $50,000 a year will have to file a long form, which is pretty time consuming, and it costs $600. Every year, all 501c3s, they must file what is called a 990 informational tax return with the IRS. If you're a small nonprofit, you can file what they call a postcard form. If you've got receipts of 50,000 or less. If you've got receipts of less than 200,000, you can file the 990 EZ, and otherwise everyone else files the long regular 990 form, which is, 20, 30 pages. Next slide. Another thing that nonprofits will have to do, or will likely have to do if you are soliciting contributions, is to file with the state of Florida, but it's the Department of Agriculture and Consumer Services. You don't need to file if you're only getting grants from organizations, and there are some exemptions, and generally educational groups and religious groups don't have to apply. There's a short form for organizations that have less than $25,000 in revenue and no paid staff, and then the long form for everyone else. And the purpose of this filing is to disclose the name, address, and purpose of the organization. Next slide. Also, when you register with the state of Florida, you have to disclose your registration on all solicitations to potential donors. And then if a donor or potential donor requests certain information, you've got to disclose that information to them. Each organization would have to file annual financial statements with the state of Florida showing the purpose for which the funds were raised, total amount of contributions, that type of thing. Next slide. This is a sample disclosure form that needs to be, typically you'll see it at the bottom of all solicitations that a charity will send out, but it also has to be on all your website pages where you request the donation. So wherever you're asking for donations on your website, you need to have that same disclosure on those pages of your website. And here's the link for more information from the Department of Agriculture, freshfromflorida.com. Okay, next slide. Some other legal issues facing nonprofits are you need to have a conflict of interest policy. Avoiding conflicts of interest among board members, directors, and staff is very important. Some other policies that you'll need to consider: whistleblower, expense reimbursement, and various other financial policies. But when you have a nonprofit, you have a lot of eyes on your company because it is for a public purpose and you're asking people to donate to it, and you really have to be very careful about how you run the nonprofit. Next slide, please. If you have a nonprofit, you may be entitled to property tax exemptions. There's some exceptions, but as it relates to real property, but typically you have to own the property as of January 1st to claim the real property exemption. So if you buy it on January 15th, you have to wait till the following year. You can also register with the Florida Department of Revenue and obtain a sales tax exemption certificate. This can be helpful whenever you purchase goods and services that are going to be used for your tax exempt purposes. And also if you're leasing commercial property, you don't have to pay sales tax on your rent. Next slide, please. I had mentioned before fictitious names, or the DBAs, and this is what you need whenever you're going to use a name other than your legal name. If you're an individual and working as a sole proprietor and your name is, John Smith, and you want to run a business called John's Lawns, then you need to file for a fictitious name. If you have a business or a nonprofit, even, it applies to them, and maybe the name of your business or nonprofit is HEAL, or Helping Exceptional Adults Learn, but you want to go by the name of just HEAL, H period, E period, A period, L period. Well, you would need to file a fictitious name for that. And the way that you do that is you register with the Florida Secretary of State, you file, you pay a $50 filing fee, and you have to post a notice in the county newspaper for a certain number of weeks. And then you'll have your fictitious name and you can use it, and it'll show up on the Secretary of State's website, SunBiz, and you have to renew it every 5 years. Next slide, please. The fictitious name, that doesn't give you any rights to the name. So it's not a trademark of the name. So like the name I had mentioned before, HEAL, that doesn't give you any rights to that particular name. And there can be lots of other companies in the state of Florida using that name. Now, if you do want to trademark your name, that's a whole nother process. And again, something that I can't really get into in this discussion, but that's something that you should consider. You may also want to consider, before you file your fictitious name, making sure that your fictitious name doesn't infringe on someone else's trademark. You want to make sure that someone else hasn't trademarked the name HEAL. One other caveat about DBAs is the DBA doesn't limit your liability. So if you're John Smith running a business called John's Lawns, you still have complete personal liability there. If you want to limit your liability, that's when you would want to set up an LLC or a corporation. Next slide. And then I just wanted to briefly mention some common agreements for small businesses. I don't think we have time to go into all of these, but some of the things that you may want to consider are a non-disclosure agreement, non-competes, independent contractor agreements, licensing and franchise agreements, equipment leases, and commercial real estate leases. Next slide. It's very important to put everything in writing. Oral agreements generally don't hold up in court, and the best way is to have it in writing. So, handshake agreements are a thing of the past, and maybe they will work out great, but if there is a dispute, then it becomes your word against the other person's word. So it's best to have a properly documented agreement. Next slide. A non-disclosure agreement is basically just a confidentiality agreement. Maybe when you're in discussions with another business about a particular transaction and you have to disclose certain information to them, your financial information, say, you may want to get you may want to have both parties sign a non-disclosure where you agree to keep all of this information confidential and not disclosed to other parties. You may want to have a non-disclosure with your employees, particularly if you really do have sensitive and confidential information. Next slide. Non-compete agreements, I'm not going to go into any detail about that, but those are used in only very, certain cases. They're really frowned upon by the legal system because they prevent people from earning a living. So there are only certain limited circumstances where you can use them, and then they have to be very limited in scope. So that's something, if you feel like you need a non-compete agreement, you really need to discuss it with an attorney to see if it's even permissible in the situation. Next slide. Independent contractor versus employee agreement. There's a big difference between employees, which are, people that are where the employer controls how they do the work and when they come to work and that type of thing. And employees have certain rights, minimum wage, overtime, things like that. And typically there'll be some sort of benefits that come along with that, paid time off, maybe, not always, but paid time off, health insurance, things like that. Independent contractors are essentially individuals that are running their own business and that work for your business, and they're not paid benefits, and they make their own decisions about how to do their job. So a lot of businesses want to try and put everybody that works for them as an independent contractor so that they don't have to pay payroll taxes or give any benefits. And that's not always going to work. There are very strict rules about that. So again, that's something that you would want to talk with an attorney about, that to make sure that you don't that you're classifying people that work with you properly. Next slide. And commercial leases, how much time do I have? Am I out of time?
Getting close. We've got two more presenters after you, and we've only got 30 minutes left.
Oh, okay. Well, I'll just wrap up by saying, that, again, commercial leasing is very, you really want to read through the leases and know what you're signing and know what you're getting into. So next slide. Can we go to the last slide with our contact information? Just want to talk a little bit about the program that we have at Legal Aid for small businesses and for nonprofits, where we can do all of these things for you if you meet our eligibility criteria. So I got our contact information here, and I would suggest, if you feel like you need legal services, to please reach out to us, and our paralegal will do intake. We'll see what you need and see if there's a way for us to help you. But we can draft agreements for you. We can help incorporate or, set up your business, or if your business is already set up, make any corrections that need to be made. And the same goes for nonprofits. So thank you very much for your time. And like I said, feel free to reach out if you've got any questions or you need any assistance.
That was excellent information, Ms. Wilson. Thank you so much for that. And I wish we had more time, because that's definitely information that our audience needs. But just to remind everyone that this webinar is being recorded. So the link will be available on our YouTube page. Use about 48 hours or so after the event concludes. And as well, we will send out the information, the PowerPoint to everyone that was registered after the event in our thank you communications. So you will get this information so that you have Ms. Wilson's contact information as well. My staff is also putting information in the chat for you, and I see conversations are going. So again, thank you so much for that. Next slide. So at this time, we will transition to our next segment of the workshop, and this will also be valuable information for many of our businesses. As the director mentioned, Mr. McDonald, as we started the workshop, we have learned a lot about what our small businesses need as we've gone through this grant process. So at this time, without further ado, I want to take this opportunity to introduce Sharon and Navi, who are a part of Broward County's Records, Taxes, and Treasuries Division, to share information on some of their business licenses and tax requirements. And you may need to unmute Sharon and Navi.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Excellent.
Perfect. Sorry. Good morning, everyone. I'm Sharon Tullo, and I'm just going to do a little overview of our local business tax receipt, what it is, what you need it, its purpose, and types of businesses that need one. Next slide, please. If you engage in a profession, business, or trade, or render service within the county, you are required by Broward County Ordinance 72-13 and 88-35 and Florida Statutes 205 to obtain the appropriate tax receipt for your business. Local business tax receipt is a tax imposed for the privilege of doing business in Broward County. Any person who provides merchandise, entertainment, or services to the public, even if only a one-person company or a home-based business, must obtain a local business tax to operate business. Next slide, please. Before coming to Broward County to obtain your business tax receipt, you must first check with the city, as most cities have their own rules and regulations to open and operate in a business in the city. Then you want to register, just like Ms. Wilson said, your entity with the Division of Corporation at sunbiz.org. You also want to obtain a EIN or TIN number with the IRS at irs.gov. And then you may proceed to obtain your Broward County tax receipt. We strongly suggest that you apply online at our website, or you can apply in person at our office. And applications are processed Monday through Friday, 8:30 to 4:30 p.m. So with the application, next slide, please. Navi's going to take over the application process.
Hi, good morning, everybody. Respected speakers, thank you all so much for allowing us the opportunity to come and speak with you all today, this webinar. And of course, you know, this is here to enforce and to teach us a little bit about business and business development. So as Sharon explained earlier, you know, Broward County business tax receipt is required of any business that's operating in the county. We have a few exemptions, and of course, some of these businesses are regulated by agencies. So depending on the type of work that you're doing, you may need to have something from an additional agency in order for us to license you. But what you're seeing here on the screen is your basic application. We have two formats of application. You can either apply on our website, which we're going to get to in a little bit, and of course you can apply in person with the attached form on there. And as you can see, you have the name of the business, the address. Also at the bottom, it has a disclaimer about registering with the state of Florida, which you would want to do to make sure nobody else has your name. Of course, we've been hearing that from our previous speakers as well. So we can go to the next slide. And again, you know, you can register your name with the state of Florida. You know, it gives you all the information on the website, sunbiz.org. We can go to the next slide. And of course, this is very important. We do need a federal ID or social security number in order to register your local business tax receipt. That's one of the most important things that we have on our application that also helps us in order to any changes and so forth that we make. We do have to let you know that that is not public information, so your safety is highly guaranteed on our end. We can go to the next slide. And of course, as we indicated before, you want to check with your city. Now, your city controls your zoning for your business tax receipt, so you want to make sure that, you know, before you come to us, that your city is going to allow you to do that business in that area. Certain businesses, you know, they want to make sure it's zoned in a certain area and all these different things. And, you know, we can issue the business tax receipt, but if your city is not going to give you approval, then it may be very hard for us to reverse it on our end. So we're always going to advise you, first and foremost, check with your city, find an area, make sure it's zoned properly for your business before you start the process with us. Next slide, please. And of course, we have a listing of all the cities there. There are 33 cities in Broward County. We also have their websites. I believe our website is on our website as well. And you can look and you can see the breakdown of the cities as well on there. And certain cities, of course, are requiring, you know, like with the city of West Park, for example, is one city that requires the customer, the business owner, to go to them first before they come to us because of zoning requirements and so forth. Next slide, please. And of course, there are parts of Broward County that is unincorporated Broward County. Those are parts of the county that are not listed under a city. So when it's unincorporated Broward, the business owner is required to show us a certificate of use. You can get that from the Broward County zoning department. They're over at 1 North University Drive, right across from Broward Mall. And basically, you know, this is something that you would have to apply with them. You tell them the type of business you're doing. I believe Jeff Day is in charge of that, but they can give you a wealth of information. Their numbers listed on there as well, 954-765-4400. We can proceed to the next slide. And of course, let me explain to you all a little bit about the fiscal year, because the interesting thing about the Broward County Business Tax Receipt is that we have 3 different rates that are offered throughout the year, providing you're using the current date. And we're going to talk a little bit about the date as well, but before that, let me just explain to you about the fiscal year. So basically, the fiscal year runs from October 1st, and it expires on September 30th. Now, if you come in on April 1st of that fiscal year, your business tax receipt is going to be prorated. So let's say a contractor pays annually $27. When he comes in on April 1st, he's only going to pay $13.50, which is half of that. Now, per Florida statute, our renewal season begins on July 1st. So you have from July 1st to September 30th to renew your business tax receipt. Any new application that comes in is going to have to pay the prorated amount of the previous year as well as the current year. So let's say it's $33 annually for a service category. If you come in on July 1st, it's going to be $49.50. If you had come in previously on April 1st, it's going to be $16.50. So that's the way how the fiscal season runs. And of course, you know, we would just like to advise all the business owners as well to know that any previous start date that you put in will have penalties and interest attached to it. So if you come in for a business tax receipt today and you put in a previous day, like yesterday, there is a 25% penalty. If it's more than 60 days, there's also going to be a $25 tax collector fee. So it's interesting, you know, it's very important that we stress that, because I know sometimes for small businesses and so forth like that are coming in, you want to make sure that your start date reflects what is required of you to get the interest of the grants and so forth like that. So we just want to kind of put that out there. But that's how the fiscal year runs. We can proceed to the next slide. Okay, and that's a listing of the categories and fees. You can see our fees run anywhere from $22.50 to $150 annually. Now, that's not including the penalties and all that. Every business is going to be different based on your start date, based on the number of employees. All this information is listed on our website, of course, giving you the full details. You can always go to Broward.org under local business tax receipt. You can always reach out to Sharon, to myself, to our department, businesstax@Broward.org, and we will be able to give you details if you need as well. We can go to the next slide. Yeah, we can go to the next slide as well. All right, and here are some important phone numbers. Of course, you know, like I said before, some of these businesses are going to be regulated by agencies. You know, if you're a contractor, you're going to have something from the state of Florida or from the Broward County Building Department. You can see we have those listed there. If you're an attorney, obviously you have to show us a bar card. Your hotel and restaurant licenses, they're all regulated by different agencies there. So we kind of put some information on there. just to kind of give everybody an overview, what is needed, what is required. And with that being said, we can go on to the next slide. Okay, friends, so pretty much that's what business tax receipt is. You know, it's a pretty simple process. I mean, you submit the application, we'll process it. We have our online access, which is BT Express. It's really simple. You go onto our website, broward.county-taxes.com. Our applications take 24 to 48 hours to be processed, and we pretty much do it all for you. Once you submit the information, we reach out to you if you have anything else that we will need from you, but it's usually done instantaneously. And of course, you know, we here at Broward County, we're very happy to help each and everybody continue to build, to grow, and to be, you know, to contribute back into society. So Sharon, any last words?
No.
Thank you so much.
There we go. Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can.
Okay, thank you. Thank you. I was saying thank you to Sharon and Navi for that information. That's valuable information that we learned quite frequently during this grant process, that many of our businesses knew they had to have a city business tax receipt, but they weren't aware they have to have one for the county as well. So it's important that information is out there so that they know that if it applies to their business and service, as Sharon and Navi outlined, that they've got to make sure they have a local business county tax receipt with the county as well. So as we get ready to wrap up, I'm going to take just a few minutes. My name is Tatyana McCall, and I'm the Community Relations and Outreach Manager for the Office of Economic and Small Business Development. And I'm just going to take just a few minutes to go over with you the difference between branding and marketing. You've had a wealth of information this morning shared with you about business planning, about legal services and how to set up and organize your business, whether it's a for-profit or a nonprofit, the importance of having your local business tax receipt for your city and for the county. So now I'm just going to give you a tidbit of information as you're developing your business, the differences between branding and marketing, so that you can have an understanding and a basis as some of the things that Dr. Tinsley was mentioning about strategic planning. Next slide, please. So what is the difference? You know, some people get confused with what branding and marketing is, and they don't understand that there is a clear distinction between the two. The words are often used interchangeably. People make it synonymous with advertising or image or promotions. So we want to make sure that you have a clear understanding when you leave this morning on what the difference and distinctions are between branding and marketing. Next slide. So first and foremost, it is important to understand the order that these take place in. So branding comes first and marketing follows. So branding takes place first in your planning process and marketing is then second. What is branding? Branding is who you are. It is your promise. It is your reputation. It is your business image. Your brand then creates loyal customers and advocates and supporters of your business. Branding is strategic and it starts with you as the business owner. After you have established your brand, then you transition to marketing, which follows and comes second, because marketing is how you communicate information about your brand. Marketing is your message. Marketing is how you find buyers, and it is how you attract people to your brand. Marketing encompasses promotions so that people understand what you have to offer, where it's offered, and all those various details. So your marketing is going to tell your story about your brand, which identifies who you are. Marketing is tactical, whereas I mentioned branding is strategic. And the key distinction between that is a strategy, or in terms of the branding, is your overarching plans. It's your set of goals for your company. Whereas marketing is tactical, and that is the specific actions or the steps that you take to accomplish your strategy. So those are the incremental steps that you're going to take to reach and to fulfill what your strategy is. And marketing starts with your customer. So that's the other key distinction. Branding starts with you as the company, and marketing starts with your customer, how you reach out to them. Next slide. So once you've established what your brand is going to be, what your image is going to be, who you are, your reputation, and now you've established a marketing plan that's going to communicate that information. It's going to promote what you have to sell or what you have to offer, your service, and what you mean to that community. You want to position yourself appropriately in the market. So you have to understand, is there a viable substitute for your product or service? That is key, because if there is, then that determines part of your strategic plan, as Dr. Tinsley was mentioning. You want to then have a competitive advantage, and a competitive advantage can be, again, your position in the market. It can be your price point. It could be the quality. It could be the size of your product. It can be a combination of the two, being first to market. There are different competitive advantages that allow you to position yourself in the market accordingly. So the question then becomes, how do you stand out from the crowd? And these very simplified illustrations that are currently on the screen, using the apples and the lemons, you've got a group of apples. So how can you be different in that group of apples? You can be a different kind of apple, a different color apple, a different size apple, or you can be positioned in a different location from the other apples. So that's going to be the key in terms of your business or service as you are making either pivots due to circumstances such as the virus and coronavirus and the pandemic, or if you're just just getting started. You want to understand the power of your position in the marketplace. Dr. Tinsley also mentioned the importance about your competitors. You've got to know who you are as a business and what your place in the market is going to be, so that you can understand that of your competition as well. Next slide. So the SWOT analysis, this is an important strategic planning tool. Dr. Tinsley mentioned that at various stages, as you're going through business ownership and being an entrepreneur, you have to do different evaluations and assessments. So one key assessment that you want to do, and you want to do it not all the time, but you want to not do it one time and leave it there. You want to make sure you follow back up on it and that you revisit it. It's called a SWOT analysis. And SWOT is an acronym for strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, threats, and trends. Your strengths are what you do well. So you ask yourself the question, what do I do well? Is it how you build your product or service? Is it the price point that you're able to do it at? Is it the quality? Is it your human resources? That do you have great staff? Are you efficient in those things? You want to understand your strengths as a business owner. Second, in terms of your weaknesses, that's where you want to identify where you're not so efficient. You know, do I make a great product, but it costs me so much, I have to have such a high price, and does it make me competitive in the market? You want to understand what those weaknesses are. Do I have a high turnover rate, and therefore that affects my productivity, and I'm slow to getting information and my resources out, my product out to my consumers? You need to know what your weaknesses are, where you're not efficient. Opportunities, these are places where you can grow, pivot, or improve. What can I do differently? How can I become more efficient and more effective so that I can have a higher profit margin? You want to understand where your opportunities in the market are. And you want to look at these things internally and externally in terms of the various environmental factors that come into play as well. The first T refers to threats, and your threats are what will be potential problems for you. And this includes your competition. So you want to have a keen understanding of what your potential threats are and what problems could potentially exist that you will have to have a path forward or a path around in order to be successful. And the last T is in reference to trends. And this may or may not apply to every industry or type of business, but it's important to consider whether it does or does not. You don't want to assume there are no trends that are going to impact your business, and then there comes one and you've not accounted for it. So do the analysis, ask the question, what external factors do I need to consider that can impact my business? Here in Florida, weather is going to be one. We have hurricane season every year. So you may not have an outdoor business, so it may not affect certain aspects of your business, but if the hurricane comes and you shut down and you lose operations, and so our power, electricity, you have to have consideration for how that's going to affect your long-term business as well as the profit margin. Next slide. So in a nutshell, that kind of concludes the high-level overview we want to make sure that you understand regarding the difference between branding and marketing, and the importance of doing a SWOT analysis and knowing your position in the marketplace. So we want to make sure that you continue to stay engaged with the Office of Economic and Small Business Development. Mr. McDonald did mention at the beginning about our weekly newsletter called The Boss, our Business Assistance Weekly. If you take your camera on your cell phone and aim it at the screen where the QR code is, if you are not currently registered to the BAW, it will prompt you to send us an email where we can then add you to the BAW. If your phone is not cooperating, as technology sometimes does, there is also an email there on the screen, econdevinfo@broward.org, that you can send us an email requesting to join our BAW, and we will get you added. That newsletter comes out every Wednesday at 6:15 every week to ensure that you have the most up-to-date information about what is happening here in the county as it relates to small business and economic development. Next slide. The Community Relations and Outreach section that I currently manage, we are a team of specialists and interns that work diligently to provide technical assistance, workshops, meet and greets, educational programs, mentoring, and targeted recruitment. We are here to help make sure that you have the resources and tools that you need to be successful here in Broward County as a small business owner. So please make sure you reach out to our office if there's anything that we can do to be of assistance. Next slide. Mr. McDonald, I'm not sure if he is going to review these resources, but we've also got a few, the next couple of slides are various resources that cover a variety of the different things we had talked about this morning. So the IRS, EIN, W-9s, getting started with SunBiz. We've provided a comprehensive list of these resources. Vanetta, you can go to the next slide as well, of all these different things that you need, legal services, financial providers, different resources here in the county that are at your disposal. Again, this presentation will be sent out to you so that you have access to it and you can click on the links, or you're welcome to take a picture of the screen if you would like. And the link will also be made available on our YouTube page, again, probably in about 48 hours. So that is all that we have. I want to make sure we take this time to give the opportunity to ask questions. Were there any questions in the chat that we need to address, Vanetta or Savika, or did you all cover
Yes.
what we went?
We did have one question. It was in regards to the business tax receipt. It was a question on whether or not any discounts are offered for military and or veterans discounts or exemption. So I'm not sure if Sharon or Navi, if you guys are still available, if you can respond to that question.
Hi, yes. I'm sorry, can you hear us?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Yes, we have exemptions as well. There's an over 65 exemption if you're over the age of 65 as well. If you've served in the military, there is an exemption as well. All you would have to do is fill out our exemption form, provide a copy that you are a Broward County resident. That's very important. And also you have to show us a DD-214, something from the military, showing that you've been a part of there, you've been discharged honorably. That discount also relates to the spouse as well. And of course, we have, if you're on any sort of assistance program, there are exemptions for that as well. Everything is listed on our website as well.
Okay, great. Thanks, Navi. And just for all our attendees today, I just wanted to take this time as well. If you did have any questions, feel free to put that in our Q&A section. You will see it right beside your name. You can as well ask a question. You can put your question in that Q&A, or you can raise your hand and you can ask your question aloud. I see that our director, Mr. Sandy Michael McDonald, has rejoined us, so I will pass it over to him.
Thanks, Savika. And again, I just want to say thank you to all of our presenters, not just the staff, but those who joined us. We really appreciated your information, and definitely our partner here at the County Records Tax and Treasury for that invaluable information for our businesses. And Ms. McCall mentioned that she was beginning to close. Stay in touch with us, connect with us, communicate with us. Again, we like to put on workshops going forward that for information or based on information we know our small businesses need. This RISE forum is going to continue again for about 2 more sessions, 3 max. We're going to have a session coming up about access to capital, where to really go in terms of identifying funds and funding sources. We all know about the stimulus bill. We all know about this new round of PPP. There's a workshop coming up on the 28th of this month that's going to have more details specific to that. And we're also going to bring the SBA in, not only on that. SBA is probably going to do a workshop with us later on in March to specifically talk about some women business opportunities, as well as understanding the true federal programs under the SBA. Again, we want to make sure that we can stabilize our businesses, not only help them to thrive, but not only help them survive, but to thrive, but give you additional information to prepare you to go through 2021 and to go into 2022 with more opportunities. So again, as always, there's going to be those workshops dealing with being a small business, doing contracting opportunities with Broward County, how to get certified. So definitely stay in touch with us this year. Again, we don't want to waste your time. We hope you attend the virtual workshops that are substantive and meaningful to you. We hope we bring presenters that offer you quality information. And in case you need to go back and get additional, we always put these workshops up on our website. This will be loaded in about 48 hours on our YouTube website. So with that, thank you for joining us today. And we hope and we pray that you and your business have the best opportunity to not just sustain, but to survive and thrive in 21. Come back alive if you are on the count out, but definitely make it through 21 to get to a stronger 22. And we hope, if possible, Broward can assist you in doing so. We want to be here for you. But thank the presenters again, and thank you all for participating. Thank you.